Roadhouse isn't just any 80s action movie, it's the film that made Patrick Swayze a legend and showed off Sam Elliott's rugged charm like never before. With all those epic bar fights and even a few surprisingly touching scenes, it's easy to see why this movie became such a pop culture hit. But there are actually a few things that were kept hidden while filming. What slip-ups did Sam Elliott keep secret while filming this classic? Stay with us as we uncover how he managed to keep his bloopers hidden on the set of Roadhouse in 1989. The bouncer, the bar, and the shenanigans. Taking a brief look at the cast and storyline, Roadhouse throws viewers into a world where a cooler is not just someone who keeps drinks cold. Played by the ever-charismatic Patrick Swayze, Dalton is a professional bouncer with a philosophy degree and a knack for keeping the peace, usually with a swift kick or a firm but friendly throat rip. The film kicks off in New York, where Dalton is breaking up a fight at the bandstand, showcasing his skills by getting stabbed in the arm. Most folks would be calling for help or nursing their wounds, but not Dalton. He stands tall like a statue, embodying the cool in cooler. Frank Tillman arrives with a proposition for Dalton. Clean up the Double Deuce, a bar with a name that's as classy as a $2 bill. He offers $5,000 up front and $500 a night. And yes, it has Jeff Healey playing behind protective fencing, because in this establishment, patrons are more likely to hurl beer bottles than request angel eyes. Honestly, the crowd's behavior resembles a circus, and Dalton is their reluctant ringmaster. But Dalton isn't just in it for the cash. He's like Johnny Appleseed, but for bars, going from dive to dive, making them slightly less hazardous to your health. Renting a room at Old Man Emmett's farm, he discovers that Emmett's being harassed by local thug Brad Wesley. This guy's the kind of businessman who shakes people down for fun. If shakedowns were Olympic events, he'd be going for gold. Dalton lays down some ground rules for his staff. Never underestimate your opponent. Always take it outside, because who wants to fight indoors? And be nice. Yes, be nice. Imagine someone calling you a sucker, and your response is, "You have a lovely smile." Not the typical bouncer tactic, but Dalton knows that kindness goes a long way, until it doesn't. Firing a bartender for skimming cash, he maintains that zen-like demeanor. Meanwhile, he's driving a beat-up Buick Riviera because, in the world of Roadhouse nothing screams badass like a car that looks like it survived a monster truck rally. Just when it seems life can't get crazier, Dalton finds his car trashed and has to deal with Wesley's goons, which is basically a day in the life of a bouncer in Jasper, Missouri. After a few brawls and an unfortunate throat-ripping incident, yes, that's a thing, Dalton faces off with Wesley. This showdown is where the action peaks, and Dalton's throat-ripping skills are put to the ultimate test. But just as he's about to execute his signature move, a host of locals shows up to save the day. The police arrive, and what do they hear? "I didn't see anything," as if the townsfolk have collectively taken a vow of silence. Roadhouse, the cult classic that put bouncers on the map and made throat-ripping the new black. Now let's explore some of the movie's flaws. The flawed fantasy. Let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, or should it be called the Roadhouse in the parking lot? It's a dive bar, not a five-star resort. But when our hero, Dalton, rolls into town, it feels like the arrival of a rock star. Cue the drama. And there's a scene where he's stitching up his own stab wound. Because what's a bouncer without a little DIY surgery, right? It's a manly moment. And while it might inspire some admiration, let's be real. A bit of antiseptic wouldn't have gone amiss. Keeping those germs at bay is always a good idea. Then there's Wade Garrett. The man's basically the Yoda of bouncers. But he's 44 in this film, while Dalton's a spry 37. What's with calling Wade old? At that age, he's just hitting his stride. It's like calling a fine wine past its prime. Absolutely blasphemous. Let's talk cash flow. Dalton's getting $5,000 up front and $500 a night. Who knew being a bouncer in Jasper, Missouri would come with such a fat paycheck? The only thing Jasper has going for it is 2 cows and a slightly sad Applebee's. How does this bar justify the kind of cash that would make a Vegas lounge act jealous? Did they hit the lottery? Is there a hidden treasure beneath the dance floor? The plot thickens, and just when things seem to make sense, Dalton drops a bomb about flying being too dangerous. Seriously? In a job where dodging knives and chokeslams is just another Tuesday afternoon, but flying? That's off limits? High risk, low reward makes sense unless a hot air balloon ride enters the picture. Then there are the credits. After a logo that only lasts 8 seconds, there's an expectation that the credits might roll for a minute or two. Nope. It's an epic 8 minutes of names that will never be remembered. Peckerhead is a term of endearment in this flick, because who wouldn't want to be called that after a long day of bouncer duty? Let's talk about the scene where Dalton has to deal with a guy who tries to get a kiss for 20 bucks. 20 bucks? Dalton should have been charging by the hour. Instead, he just watches as the poor guy gets tossed around like a rag doll for not having the funds for that very questionable transaction. Talk about a rough night at the office. One minute you're collecting tips, and the next you're witnessing a brutal lesson in financial responsibility. And what's the deal with that perfectly orchestrated bar fight? Not only does Dalton dodge beer bottles like he's in an action movie, but he also manages to mind control the flying glass shards, ensuring they miss him entirely. Meanwhile, the band is still belting out tunes like it's just another Tuesday night. If a bar fight gets the Titanic treatment, you better believe this band is going down with the ship. Sans iceberg. Speaking of memorable characters, enter Ben Gazzara as Brad Wesley. With a name like that, he sounds more like a real estate agent than a villain. Hi, I'm Brad Wesley. Let's discuss your mortgage options. There's nothing remotely intimidating about that. Even the dude's creepy smile feels more like he's trying to sell you a used car than threaten your life. Maybe it's just bad casting, but one can't help but chuckle every time he pops up on screen. The most ludicrous aspect of this cinematic experience has to be the legendary beer, which, according to the lore, has about 55% foam. Foaming beer? Talk about a bouncer's worst nightmare. Right up there with bad tips and broken glass. And who can forget the unforgettable dialogue? I heard you have balls big enough to come in a dump truck, Dalton quips. Really? That's the best line in a film where throat-ripping and beer dodging are the main attractions. Imagine trying to enjoy a drink while all this chaos unfolds around you. With sawdust on the floor, it feels like the bar itself is in on the joke. Is this a watering hole or a lumberjack convention? Come on, can't a guy enjoy his drink without feeling like he should be wearing plaid? At this point, the only thing missing is a sign that says, "Enter at your own risk," while the band plays on and the chaos continues, one foam-filled beer at a time. Editing catastrophe? Roadhouse might be an 80s cult classic, but let's just say the editing team had some unique contributions. Fans quickly noticed that Dalton's showdown skills included disarming the same guy with the same knife. Not once, but twice. Maybe he was going for a record in bad guy disarmament, but that wasn't all. Right after that, Dalton's face already had blood on it before he'd even taken a hit. It's as if his face had a premonition. It's a moment that leaves you scratching your head as you wonder if Dalton is just that intense. Speaking of head-scratchers, Roadhouse claims to be set in the seedy underbelly of Jasper, near Kansas City. But eagle-eyed viewers couldn't miss the towering mountains in the background. Jasper, Missouri isn't exactly known for scenic peaks, so those mountains are pure Southern California, giving Jasper a bit of a makeover. And when Dalton rents his room, the old landlord's truck has an Arizona license plate, even though we're supposed to be deep in Missouri. It might seem like a small oversight, but fans were all over it, calling out the goof like they'd just won an Easter egg hunt. Let's not forget the car part shop scene, where Dalton buys a crucial part for his vehicle. Only it's magically handed to him by a mystery hand from behind the shelves. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it's just one more reason Roadhouse has developed a certain charm. In Roadhouse, where fists fly almost as often as the lines are delivered, even a bar fight can be punctuated by the occasional unexpected laugh. Take, for instance, the musical mishap involving the lead vocalist played by Jeff Healey during one of the bar scenes. The band is rocking on, the crowd's into it, but Healey's head is tossed back in a rather theatrical pose, only his lips not moving an inch. Yet magically, his voice is singing out loud and clear. Clearly, no one on the set felt it necessary to keep the vocals and visuals in sync here. It's a comical slip-up in a film otherwise scrupulous about its high-octane, hyper-coordinated brawls. But hey, with so much choreography dedicated to punches and kicks, maybe there was only so much precision left to spread around. These little flubs, especially in an intense action film like Roadhouse, ironically give it a kind of warmth, like a friendly wink from the filmmakers. And for fans, part of the fun of watching and rewatching the movie is spotting these quirks and wondering how they managed to sneak into the final cut. In fact, many fans have a fondness for Healy's character sporting a wristwatch despite his blindness. Seems odd at first, right? But Healy, who was blind in real life after losing his sight to retinoblastoma as a baby, wore a Braille wristwatch to tell time by touch. What looks like a goof is actually a slice of his real-life experience woven into the story, adding an unexpectedly genuine layer to his role. And just when you think you've seen it all, there's the infamous reflection blooper. During a scene outside Red's Auto Parts, eagle-eyed fans caught sight of a camera truck's reflection glinting off the Mustang. It's the kind of thing you'd expect to be carefully edited out in any other film, but for Roadhouse, it's almost as if the filmmakers threw up their hands and thought, hey, close enough. It's a quirky reminder that, amid all the fights and bravado, this is still a movie, a project made by a team trying to wrangle the chaos of action-packed scenes, even if a little of the backstage slips into the spotlight. Another classic Roadhouse moment happens when Dalton's busy fixing up his ride after yet another chaotic night on the job. He opens the trunk, and there it is, a car battery clearly marked Sears Die Hard. Now, unless the locals of this fictional Missouri town were time travelers with a taste for 21st century automotive brands, this little detail just wasn't in sync with the film's timeline. It's like the filmmakers were giving us a freebie, a little nod to future automotive trends that only make sense to viewers now. And then there's the scene where Dalton's sitting in his room looking all broody and mysterious when a background window casually reveals the reflection of, drumroll, the camera truck. It's almost poetic, really. In a film that's all about gritty, bare-knuckle authenticity, there's the unmistakable gleam of filmmaking machinery right there in the shot, like catching Superman with his cape snagged on the curtain. These bloopers don't just slide by unnoticed. For die-hard fans, they're treasures to be uncovered, adding a little extra zest to each rewatch. You almost wonder if they were left in on purpose, as if the filmmakers knew they'd only add to the movie's unique charm. Or maybe they were too busy dodging real-life bar fights on set to notice. Either way, these little mix-ups have become as much a part of Roadhouse as Swayze's Dalton. Rough around the edges, but somehow even better because of it. Hidden garage connection. Now here's a little did you know that's guaranteed to make you chuckle. Roadhouse and 48 Hours share a filming location, that's right. The same garages where Reggie Hammond, played by Eddie Murphy, kept his ride in 48 Hours also house Dalton's Mercedes in Roadhouse. Imagine that, Eddie Murphy and Patrick Swayze's characters unknowingly parking buddies. And Hollywood, in its infinite wisdom, didn't even bother to dress up the location to look a bit different. They just hit replay on the set. If you're thinking, how did no one notice? Join the club. It's one of those blink and you miss it details. After all, by the time Dalton's out in the world taking out baddies with his martial arts moves, Reggie's been on the scene for 7 years already, mouthing off with classic lines like, "I'm your worst nightmare with a badge." Can you imagine Reggie's reaction if he found out his old hangout was now a resting spot for Dalton's prized car? "Hey, buddy, I made this garage cool years ago." Joel Silver, who produced both films, clearly knew a good spot when he saw it, so why not save a buck by reusing it? Hollywood's filled with these sneaky little overlaps. Think of it as a secret code among filmmakers. So next time you're rewatching Roadhouse, keep an eye out for Dalton's car. Somewhere, Eddie Murphy's Reggie is probably laughing at the thought. Cult classic with swagger. Roadhouse might not have taken the 1989 box office by storm, but boy, did it find its way into the hearts of action fans everywhere. You could say it swept the leg of audiences over time, turning into a cult favorite that's still celebrated today. And let's face it, while some die-hard Dirty Dancing fans were left scratching their heads, others leaned into Patrick Swayze's gritty bouncer persona with all the enthusiasm of a bar fight at the Double Deuce. Swayze as Dalton was a far cry from the dreamy dancer who was lifting baby in the air. Dalton was the tough guy with a code, dropping some of the most quotable rules for bouncers that somehow became iconic. Think about it. Be nice, expect the unexpected, and take it outside. It's not just bouncer wisdom. The NYPD even picked up on Dalton's rules and turned them into a training seminar. If that doesn't make you a cult classic, what does? Swayze didn't just bring his charm to Roadhouse, he brought some serious moves. To make sure his action scenes looked real, he trained with legendary kickboxer Benny Urquidez. Urquidez, who'd already worked with the likes of Jackie Chan, actually thought Swayze was good enough to go pro in kickboxing. But Swayze was already armed with an ace up his sleeve, his dance background. Let's be real. If you can nail a mambo routine in Dirty Dancing, spin-kicking a villain through a plate glass window is just another step in the choreography. Sam Elliott, meanwhile, played Wade Garrett, Dalton's wise, gravelly-voiced mentor. Wade was like the Gandalf of bar fights, guiding Dalton through the chaos with his own brand of rugged charm. And with Elliott's natural gravitas, they were an unstoppable duo, the ultimate yin and yang of bouncer justice. Together, they gave Roadhouse a 1-2 punch of cool that helped balance the melodrama and intense action scenes. And the action? It was mostly real. Swayze and the rest of the cast did their own stunts. Some actors were even hired specifically for their stunt skills, so when you see Dalton going all in against a small army of bad guys, that's Swayze himself, bruises and all. Not to mention, he was still dealing with a lingering injury from his college football days. It's like they threw authenticity into the ring, and it came out with a few black eyes but looked great. In a wink to cowboy mythology, Roadhouse even named its characters after real-life outlaws. Sam Elliott's Wade Garrett? His name nods to Pat Garrett, the Wild West sheriff famous for his showdown with Billy the Kid. This little tip of the hat to cowboy lore gave Roadhouse a dose of Americana with a modern spin. It was like the Wild West had been reimagined, complete with bar fights and bouncer wisdom. These quirks, mixed with Swayze's and Elliott's dedication to the roles, make Roadhouse a unique piece of 80s cinema. A film that didn't take itself too seriously but delivered every punch and one-liner with a certain swagger that just can't be beaten. Now, did you know Annette Bening almost became the leading lady in Roadhouse? Yes, that's right. The role of Doc, now forever associated with Kelly Lynch, was initially Benning's. However, in a plot twist that feels straight out of a Hollywood script, she was dismissed early on, reportedly at the behest of none other than Patrick Swayze himself. The legend goes that Swayze felt he couldn't generate any on-screen chemistry with her. Imagine that! Swayze, the heartthrob who later danced his way into everyone's hearts, couldn't get it going with Benning. Well, Kelly Lynch, who stepped in to fill the role, quickly won over fans with her performance. The chemistry between Swayze and Lynch became the talk of the town, leaving everyone to ponder how things would have played out had Benning stayed on. Perhaps Swayze and Benning would have made movie magic, or maybe it would have been more like watching paint dry. It's hard to say. Whatever the case, Benning didn't let it get her down. She soon found her own spotlight with a star-making turn in The Grifters, though she might still have a twinge of jealousy over losing that Oscar to Whoopi Goldberg, who won for Ghost, also starring Swayze, of course. Speaking of Swayze, let's talk about that infamous tank top he wore as Dalton. You know, the one that became a symbol of his rugged charm? It turns out that this wardrobe choice was more than just a fashion statement. Swayze had an abdominal injury during filming, and that tank top was a clever way to conceal a bandage. While he was rocking that tough guy look, he was also putting in the work despite the pain. That dedication is what made Swayze such an icon. And let's not forget the chaos surrounding the set of Roadhouse. After Dirty Dancing, Swayze's heartthrob status skyrocketed, leading to a flurry of female fans trying to crash the set just to catch a glimpse of him. Who could blame them? It's a miracle they managed to film anything with all that swooning going on, but despite the interruptions, Swayze kept his cool, delivering a performance that solidified his legacy. When it comes to preparation for a role, Kelly Lynch takes the cake, preferably one with a side of surgical precision. In her Oscar-nominated days, Lynch didn't just wing it for her portrayal of Dr. Elizabeth Clay in Roadhouse. Oh no, she dove headfirst into the world of medicine. Imagine her shadowing doctors and nurses in a hospital, learning the ins and outs of medical procedures. In a 2008 interview, she humorously shared how she spent an entire month mastering various techniques, including how to perform stitches. But when it came time to film, she ended up using a stapler instead. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, in the wild world of filmmaking, even the most dedicated prep can take a backseat to practicality. Lynch's experience is a delightful reminder that no matter how much you study, you might still end up stapling things together instead of sewing them up. Yet her hard work clearly paid off, as her performance as Dr. Elizabeth Clay is still remembered fondly. So the next time someone asks if preparation is key, just point them to Lynch's stapler story and say, well, it depends on what's in your toolkit. Kicking it old school. It's quite interesting to note that the legacy of Roadhouse didn't end with the credits rolling. It morphed into a cultural artifact that continued to spark inspiration, laughter, and the occasional eyebrow raise long after its release. This journey through the annals of pop culture has been wilder than the film's infamous bar brawls, serving up moments that reflect its campy charm and unexpected gravitas. Fast forward to July 2006, when Roadhouse 2 stumbled onto DVD shelves. Let's just say this sequel had all the theatrical flair of a pair of flip-flops at a black tie event. Set years after the original, it followed Dalton's adult son. But none of the original cast returned. It was like a family reunion where everyone decided to bail, leaving only the distant cousin who showed up for the free food. The sequel barely acknowledged Dalton, revealing that our hero had met an untimely end, shot and killed before the opening credits rolled. However, amid the sequel's mediocrity, one nugget piqued fans' interest. Dalton's full name was confirmed as James Dalton. Die-hard fans of the original might have felt a small thrill as they recalled a fleeting glimpse of James Dalton on a medical chart during a hospital scene. It was a callback that offered a glimmer of nostalgia, even if it didn't do much to salvage the film itself. As Roadhouse 2 hit the shelves like a poorly mixed cocktail, the original film enjoyed a resurgence with a deluxe edition re-release. This special edition came packed with extras, including audio commentary tracks by director Rowdy Herrington and the comedic duo Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier. Their hilarious take on the film was like adding a splash of lime to a classic cocktail, giving fans a fresh perspective on the beloved action flick. In a delightful twist of fate, Roadhouse found its way to the stage in 2003. Enter Roadhouse, the stage version of the cinema classic that starred Patrick Swayze, except this one stars Timac from the 1980s. Cult classic, The Last Dragon wearing a blonde mullet wig. Yes, that's a mouthful. This off-Broadway adaptation leaned into the film's campiness, featuring exaggerated fight scenes and characters that took the original's absurdity and cranked it up to 11. Timac's take on the iconic role showcased Roadhouse's enduring appeal, turning it into a hilarious romp that had audiences rolling in the aisles. Interestingly, Roadhouse continued to make its mark on television, with animated series like Family Guy paying homage in their own quirky way. In a Season 8 episode titled Brian's Got a Brand New Bag, Peter Griffin discovers a dusty DVD of Roadhouse and becomes utterly obsessed. His solution to every problem? Roundhouse kick everything in sight. Friends, family, you name it. It's a hilariously absurd tribute to Dalton's tough guy persona, showcasing how the film's influence permeated even the wackiest corners of pop culture. And who could forget that this episode was dedicated to Patrick Swayze, a fitting homage to a man who made kicking ass look like an art form? Not to be outdone, young Sheldon threw its own nod to the Roadhouse legacy in a surprising way. In a Season 4 episode, viewers discover that Mary Cooper, Sheldon's upright mother, secretly loves action movies like Roadhouse. This unexpected revelation fosters a sweet bond with her son, Georgie, illustrating how the film continues to resonate across generations, popping up in the most unlikely situations. Who knew the world of nerds and action films could collide so delightfully? And if that wasn't enough to illustrate Roadhouse's surprising influence, consider this. The film even found its way into law enforcement training. Following the tragic death of Eric Garner in 2014, the NYPD implemented a 3-day retraining course for officers. Part of this program included a scene from Roadhouse where Dalton advises bouncers to be nice when handling volatile situations. It's a moment that underscores the film's underlying philosophy, emphasizing the importance of de-escalation. Who would have thought that Dalton's sage wisdom would transcend barroom brawls and make its way into real-world training? Now let's fast forward to 2024, where Roadhouse has risen from the ashes yet again. This time in a remake starring Jake Gyllenhaal as an ex-UFC fighter taking on the bouncer role in a Florida Keys Roadhouse. Directed by Doug Liman, this film promises to deliver the same action-packed thrills with a fresh take for a new generation. The supporting cast features a mix of talent, including Daniela Melchior and Conor McGregor, who adds an intriguing twist to the narrative. As fans await the latest installment, it's clear that the spirit of Roadhouse, a perfect blend of charm, humor, and action, remains alive and well. What do you think it is about Roadhouse that keeps audiences coming back for more? Whether it's through remakes, stage adaptations, or animated tributes, make sure to subscribe and let us know.